What if the most extraordinary museum on Earth had no walls, no roof, no tickets, and no visiting hours, and had been open for thousands of years without anyone knowing it was there? Imagine a place where Greek merchant ships still carry their last cargo of wine amphorae, exactly as they were loaded on a busy harbour dock 2,000 years ago. Where Roman warships lie exactly where they sank in the chaos of a naval battle, their bronze rams still pointing forward, their wooden hulls dark and perfectly preserved in the cold and the silt. Where Byzantine trading vessels rest quietly on the seafloor, their holds still full of the olive oil and grain and coloured glass that merchants were carrying from one end of the ancient world to the other on an ordinary trading day that became, without warning, their last. Where Phoenician cargo ships, older than the Roman Empire, older than classical Greece, lie undisturbed in the deep cold water of the Mediterranean, carrying goods from a civilization so ancient that most people today could not name a single city it built. This place exists. It is not imaginary, not mythological, not the subject of wishful thinking by romantic treasure hunters with too much time and too little science. It is real, it is vast, and it lies beneath the surface of the Mediterranean Sea, the most historically trafficked body of water in the entire history of human civilization, a relatively small and enclosed sea that has been carrying the ships and the dreams and the commerce of the ancient world for at least 4,000 years and has been collecting their wrecks on its floor for just as long. The Mediterranean is, quite simply, the greatest shipwreck graveyard on Earth. And scientists, archaeologists, and divers have only just begun to understand what lies down there. To appreciate the true scale of what the Mediterranean holds on its floor, you have to first appreciate what the Mediterranean meant to the ancient world. In the centuries before the great age of Atlantic exploration, before Columbus, before Vasco da Gama, before the European powers turned their eyes toward the Americas and Asia, the Mediterranean was the center of everything. It was the highway of civilization. Every major culture of the ancient Western world, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Carthaginians, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Arabs, the Venetians, built their power and their wealth on the ability to move goods, soldiers, ideas, and people across this sea. Grain from Egypt fed Rome. Tin from Cornwall, traveling through Phoenician trade networks, became bronze weapons in the hands of Mesopotamian armies. Silk from China arrived at Mediterranean ports after crossing half the known world. Purple dye made from sea snails on the Lebanese coast colored the robes of kings and emperors from one end of the ancient world to the other. All of this movement required ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships, crossing the Mediterranean in every direction, in every season, carrying every imaginable cargo. And the Mediterranean, for all its beauty, is not a gentle sea. It produces sudden and savage storms that can go from flat calm to catastrophic in a matter of hours. Its rocky coasts are treacherous. Its currents are unpredictable. Its winds shift without warning. Ancient ships, built from wood, powered by oars and sail, navigated by the stars and the experience of their captains, were impressive and seaworthy by the standards of their time, but they were not indestructible. They sank. They sank in storms and in battles and on rocks and in fires and simply from the slow accumulation of damage that long voyages inflict on wooden hulls. They sank by the thousands over the course of 4,000 years of maritime civilization. And the Mediterranean kept every single one of them. The first systematic underwater archaeological excavation of an ancient shipwreck in the Mediterranean took place in 1960, when an American archaeologist named George Bass, working with the University of Pennsylvania Museum, led a team of divers to excavate a Bronze Age shipwreck off the coast of Cape Gelidonia in southern Turkey. The wreck dated to approximately 1200 BC, making it the oldest shipwreck ever systematically excavated at that time, and the cargo it carried told an extraordinary story of ancient trade networks that historians had previously only been able to piece together from fragmentary land evidence. The ship had been carrying copper ingots from Cyprus and tin ingots from somewhere in the Near East, the raw materials that, combined, make bronze, the metal that gave the Bronze Age its name. It carried tools, personal belongings, stone weights for a merchant scale, and cylinder seals that suggested a Syro-Palestinian origin for at least some of those aboard. In a single shipwreck, archaeologists had found direct physical evidence of the international Bronze Age trade networks that had been supplying the ancient world with the materials of civilization for centuries. George Bass went on to become the founding father of underwater archaeology as a serious scientific discipline, and the Cape Gelidonia excavation was followed in 1984 by an even more spectacular discovery at a site called Uluburun, also off the Turkish coast. At a depth of around 150 feet, divers discovered what is now considered the richest Bronze Age shipwreck ever found. A 14th century BC vessel carrying a cargo so diverse and so valuable that it reads like an inventory of the entire ancient world's luxury trade. The wreck contained 10 tons of copper ingots from Cyprus, 1 ton of tin ingots, ebony logs from Africa, glass ingots from Egypt, jars of olives, pomegranates, figs, and spices, Egyptian gold jewelry, Canaanite gold and silver, a scarab bearing the name of the Egyptian queen Nefertiti, a Mycenaean sword, Cypriot pottery, Phoenician jewelry, and objects from at least 7 different ancient cultures. The ship appeared to have been sailing from the eastern Mediterranean ports toward the Aegean, carrying diplomatic gifts and luxury trade goods for the royal courts of the Bronze Age world, when something, a storm, most likely, ended its journey and sent it to the bottom. The Uluburun wreck was excavated over 11 seasons between 1984 and 1994, producing over 18,000 individual artifacts and rewriting scholarly understanding of Bronze Age trade and diplomacy. It remains one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, remarkable not just for the richness of its cargo but for what that cargo revealed about the interconnectedness of the ancient world. The extraordinary web of trade relationships, diplomatic exchanges, and cultural contacts that linked Egypt, Mycenae, Cyprus, Canaan, Anatolia, and the Aegean into a single sophisticated international system more than 3,000 years ago. But the Turkish coast, extraordinary as its wrecks have been, is only one corner of the Mediterranean story. The deeper waters of the open Mediterranean, waters that ancient divers with breath-hold techniques and rope lines could never reach, waters that even early scuba divers in the mid-20th century could not safely access, have been yielding their secrets only as deep-sea technology has advanced to the point where robots and remotely operated vehicles can descend to depths of thousands of feet and look around. The results have been staggering. A systematic deep-water survey of the waters between Sicily and Tunisia, a stretch of sea that was one of the most heavily trafficked routes in the ancient world, connecting the western and eastern Mediterranean, has revealed what researchers describe as an underwater motorway of ancient shipwrecks. Ancient vessels litter the seafloor along this route in remarkable density, their cargoes intact, their hulls preserved to varying degrees depending on depth and bottom conditions. Greek transport amphorae, the large ceramic storage jars used to carry wine, olive oil, and fish sauce across the ancient Mediterranean, lie scattered across the seafloor in their thousands, still in the neat rows in which they were stacked in the ships hold 2,000 years ago. Roman merchant ships carrying building materials, grain, and metals lie beside them, followed chronologically by Byzantine traders, Arab merchants, and medieval Venetian vessels, each layer of wrecks marking another chapter in the long maritime history of this extraordinary sea. One of the most scientifically significant deep-water discoveries in recent years came from the waters around the Greek island of Antikythera, where one of the most famous ancient shipwrecks in the world was first discovered by Greek sponge divers in 1900. That original discovery produced extraordinary treasures: bronze statues of extraordinary quality, marble sculptures, glass vessels, jewelry, and most famously the Antikythera mechanism, an astonishingly sophisticated ancient Greek astronomical calculator made of interlocking bronze gears that could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets decades in advance, and which represents the most complex mechanical device known to have existed in the ancient world before the medieval period. The mechanism was so far ahead of anything else from its era that when it was first studied, some researchers genuinely struggled to accept that it was ancient rather than modern. A century after the original sponge diver discovery, a new international research project using advanced underwater robots and the latest archaeological survey techniques returned to the Antikythera wreck site and found that far more of the ancient ship remained on the seafloor than previously realized. The ship appears to have been a very large Roman-era vessel, possibly 40 to 50 meters long, carrying a cargo that included multiple large bronze statues, marble sculptures, glass, pottery, and the extraordinary mechanism, all of it apparently being transported from somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean, possibly the island of Rhodes, to Rome. New excavation seasons between 2014 and 2019 produced new bronze fragments, new statue pieces, A human skeleton whose DNA analysis revealed a young male of likely Mediterranean origin, new sections of the ship's wooden hull, and continued strong evidence that much of the wreck's cargo remains buried in the sediment and has never been recovered. The deeper story of Mediterranean shipwreck archaeology, however, goes beyond individual spectacular discoveries and speaks to something more fundamental about what these wrecks collectively represent. An ancient shipwreck is not simply a collection of interesting objects. It is a time capsule, a sealed, fixed moment in history, preserved exactly as it was on the day the ship went down, untouched by the political changes, religious transformations, conquests, and cultural revolutions that have altered and destroyed the land record of ancient civilizations so thoroughly over the centuries. When a Roman merchant ship sinks in a storm in the year 50 BC, it takes with it a precise snapshot of Roman commercial life at that exact moment. The goods being traded, the containers they were stored in, the tools the sailors used, the personal possessions they carried, sometimes the bodies of the people aboard. Nothing has been sorted through, edited, or reinterpreted by later generations. Nothing has been stolen, melted down, rebuilt over, or buried under centuries of subsequent occupation. It is exactly as it was, sitting on the floor of the sea, waiting. This makes shipwrecks uniquely valuable to archaeologists in ways that even the most important land sites cannot match. On land, ancient sites are almost always palimpsests, layers of occupation and reoccupation and rebuilding and destruction stacked on top of each other, with each layer disturbing and destroying elements of what came before. A Roman house may be built on the foundations of a Greek one. A medieval church may incorporate columns from an ancient temple. A modern city may sit on top of 3,000 years of continuous human occupation, each generation obliterating some portion of what the previous generation left behind. Separating and interpreting these layers requires enormous skill, considerable guesswork, and always involves some irreversible loss of information. A shipwreck has none of these complications. It is one moment, fixed and pure, as legible as a diary entry if you have the skills to read it. The arrangement of the cargo tells you how the ship was loaded. The distribution of personal belongings tells you where different members of the crew slept and worked. The tools and equipment found aboard tell you about the technology available to ancient sailors. The biological remains, seeds, food scraps, wood species from the ship's construction, pollen trapped in organic residues, tell you about the agricultural, botanical, and environmental world the ship came from. A single well-excavated shipwreck can produce more precisely dated, contextually reliable information about ancient life than decades of land excavation. The challenge, of course, is finding them and getting to them. The Mediterranean is not a small sea. It covers nearly 1 million square miles and reaches depths of over 17,000 feet in its deepest point. The thousands of ancient vessels that lie on its floor are scattered across an enormous area, many of them in very deep water that was inaccessible to any form of investigation before the development of sophisticated remotely operated vehicles and autonomous underwater survey drones in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Even today, with the best technology available, surveying the deep Mediterranean floor in any comprehensive way is an enormous and expensive undertaking. But the technology is improving rapidly. Side-scan sonar systems mounted on autonomous underwater vehicles can now survey large areas of the seafloor in fine resolution, producing detailed maps that show anomalies, unusual shapes, unnatural regularity, the telltale mound of a buried hull beneath the sediment, that direct human investigation to the most promising sites. Sub-bottom profilers can penetrate the sediment and reveal buried structures invisible to surface sonar. High-resolution photogrammetry allows researchers to create precise three-dimensional digital models of wreck sites without touching them, building a complete archaeological record before a single artifact is moved. And advances in deep-sea robotics are making it possible to conduct careful, methodical excavation at depths that would be simply impossible for human divers. The picture that is emerging from all of this work is one of almost incomprehensible richness. Researchers from the CNRS in France, from Oxford University, from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, from Greek, Italian, Turkish, and Spanish maritime archaeology programs, working separately and in collaboration, have between them surveyed and documented hundreds of ancient wrecks in Mediterranean waters over the past few decades, and they estimate that this represents only a tiny fraction of what is actually down there. Some estimates suggest that the Mediterranean floor may hold as many as 1 million ancient shipwrecks from the Bronze Age to the medieval period, the vast majority of them completely undiscovered, undisturbed, and perfectly preserved in the cold, dark water. 1 million ships. 1 million last voyages. 1 million cargoes loaded on docks that no longer exist, by hands belonging to people whose names were never written down, carrying goods to ports that in some cases were buried by earthquakes or swallowed by the sea long before any historian came along to record that they had existed. Each one a sealed diary. Each one a fixed moment from a world that is otherwise gone. Each one waiting in the dark with perfect patience for the light of an underwater torch to find it and begin, carefully and respectfully, to read it. The ancient Mediterranean was the crossroads of the world. It was where civilizations met and traded and fought and borrowed from each other and built, collectively, the foundations of the world we live in today. The shipwrecks on its floor are not just archaeological sites. They are the physical evidence of that crossroads, the material record of the connections and the commerce and the daring that made the ancient world what it was. They are the proof that the ancient Mediterranean was not a collection of separate civilizations occasionally bumping into each other, but a single, extraordinarily interconnected human world, linked by these brave wooden ships that crossed this beautiful and treacherous sea day after day after day for 4,000 years. The sea took them. The sea kept them. And now, one careful dive at a time, one remotely operated camera at a time, one painstakingly recovered amphora at a time, the sea is giving them back, and with them, the stories of a world that thought it was gone forever.